So I'd like to give you a little introduction to myself. This is me at the age of 3 practicing to become a doctor. And this is my formative years, so I think if you want to understand me, I was born and raised in Southern California. Might note the high air quality in Southern California in those days. My favorite beach. And then I moved to Boston in 1971 for medical school and learned that Boston is not like Los Angeles. And I got stuck there for about nearly 40 years. This is actually a house I currently still own. And this is a research plan that I formulated in 1984 when I started my first lab. And I'm still working in the same research plan, so I guess I'm stuck somewhere. And the idea was to isolate clones for genes in the myeloid lineage of the blood system. That took 5 years. And to work my way all the way to a disease in adults called acute myeloid leukemia. And what I didn't have in 1984 is how long it would take. It took 5 years to get that step, 3 years for that step, another 2 years for that step, 3 years for that step, 5 years. And we're now working on specific therapies, and that's one of the things that I want to focus on in Singapore. So just to explain in pictorial form the system we work on stem cells in the blood that are in the bone marrow, and they differentiate into the white blood cells that float around in your blood, in this case granulocytes that eat bacteria and are very important in that process. And basically we isolated transcription factors. These are proteins that turn on genes and induce this normal process of differentiation. And the reason we're interested in this process is that in leukemia you get a block in this differentiation process, and these genes are disrupted. And so that's why we focused in this area. So we were first to describe mutations in one of these genes called CBP alpha in acute myeloid leukemia in a paper in 2001. This is wonderful postdoc Thomas Papps who described that. And mutations in this gene are now part of the WHO diagnostic criteria for acute myeloid leukemia. And in Singapore, one of the things I'd like to do is to use the knowledge about this gene to develop targeted therapies. And so in the last couple of years, there's been a large impetus to study the pattern of genes in specific patients as a way of developing specific therapies for patients. And so we've been focusing on this gene called CBP, which is involved in acute myeloid leukemia, and we've taken a genomics approach by studying the different genes that this protein turns on to compare it to different patient samples in order to predict what kinds of drugs the patients will respond to with different types of gene patterns. And so that's one of our major efforts here in Singapore. And so the other major effort in Singapore is to direct the Cancer Science Institute at the National University. We've only been open a year. We're going to have our first anniversary celebration early next week. And so this is a major part of my effort, actually, to set up this actually, it's a cancer research center which extends from basic sciences all the way to clinical translational research and interacts very closely with other departments in the university and also the hospital and the physicians. And then finally, I'd like to thank Professor Saw for really supporting my efforts here, and then many others at National University who are in this room. I'd like to thank you very much.